The late afternoon sky over the small town of Millwood, Ohio, began to bruise purple, signaling the rain that was moments away. The sound of traffic mixed with the shouts of food truck vendors hastily closing their windows. Amidst the bustle, a girl in jeans and a faded high school sweatshirt walked quickly along the sidewalk, clutching a worn backpack that was splitting at the seams. Her name was Eliza Hayes, a junior at the local public high school. She was only 17, but the weight on her shoulders was far heavier than that of her peers. Her father had died a year ago in a construction accident, and her mother, Sarah, worked as a seamstress out of their small apartment. Eliza often helped her mother after school by selling homemade cookies at the downtown bus terminal. That afternoon, the rain started suddenly. Eliza ran, crossing the street to find shelter. She had just pulled a plastic bag over her backpack when a sharp whistle cut through the air from a small police substation on the corner. "Hey you! Stop right there," someone shouted from inside. Eliza turned. A man in a police uniform stepped out. He was tall and broad, with a hard face and a thick mustache. His name was Officer Mike Sullivan. He was known around the neighborhood as a bully, always looking for a reason to stop someone. Many residents avoided him, knowing he had a reputation for shaking people down for fines on the street. "What's the problem, officer?" Eliza asked politely. Officer Sullivan glanced at a clipboard, then at an old moped parked by the curb nearby. "Whose scooter is that?" he asked sharply. "It's mine, sir. It was my late father's. I'm just trying to get home." "It's raining." The officer stroked his chin. "Tags on this thing are expired." "Where's the registration?" Eliza tensed. She knew the registration was lapsed. They just didn't have the money to renew it. "I'm sorry, sir. I haven't had a chance. But as soon as my mom gets paid." "I can't cut you a break," Sullivan said flatly. "This is a violation. You know the rules, right? I have to impound the scooter." "Sir, please don't. I just want to go home." "I can get it sorted out tomorrow," she pleaded, her voice nearly lost in the downpour. Officer Sullivan stared at her for a long moment. "If you want the scooter back, you'll have to pay the fine. $200 should cover it." Eliza stared at him wide-eyed. $200? "Sir, I don't have that kind of money. I only have $5 for the bus." The officer smirked. "Well, if you can't pay, I take the scooter. Or..." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You come inside the substation with me. We can talk about it." Eliza took a step back, her stomach clenching. "What do you mean?" Sullivan laughed, a low, harsh sound. "Don't play dumb. You help me out a little tonight, maybe I can help you out." Eliza's face went pale. She knew exactly what he meant, and her heart began to pound. She tried to turn and walk away, but Sullivan's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with painful force. "Sir, let go. I'm going home," she cried out, terrified. "Quiet," Sullivan barked. "Are you resisting an officer?" A few people saw the confrontation from a distance, but in the heavy rain and the dim light of the substation, no one dared to approach. They all knew Officer Sullivan's reputation. Whoever crossed him usually ended up in more trouble inside. The dim fluorescent light flickered. Eliza was pulled inside, her body trembling. Sullivan tossed his rain jacket onto a chair and stared at her. "You want me to book you, or do you want this over with quick?" His voice was heavy. "I didn't do anything wrong," Eliza whispered. Sullivan slammed his hand on the desk. "No? Expired tags, resisting an officer, and disrespect. That's enough for me to hold you overnight." Tears began to fall down Eliza's cheeks. She knew if she fought, her fate might be worse. But she couldn't just give in. "I'm begging you, sir. Just give me 2 days. I promise I'll pay the registration." The officer just laughed. "Promises don't buy gas, kid." Suddenly, he kicked a chair, sending it clattering across the floor and making Eliza jump. He snarled, grabbing the front of her sweatshirt. "You think I'm kidding?" Eliza's sobs grew louder. "Please, sir, don't be rough." But there was no mercy in his eyes. He shoved her against the wall, his voice menacing. "You need to learn your place. This world is hard. If you don't have money, don't act all high and mighty with me. Just then, footsteps were heard outside. A young man in a red DoorDash jacket ran toward the substation. Officer. Officer Sullivan, he yelled. Sullivan instantly released his grip on Eliza and turned. What? There's a citizen who needs help down by the diner. Said there was a small accident. A car slid into the ditch. Sullivan rolled his eyes, annoyed. Damn it. Always interrupting. He grabbed his hat and moved to the door, stopping to give Eliza one last, cold stare. You wait right here. Don't go anywhere. If you run, I'll come to your house. As soon as he was gone, Eliza collapsed to the floor. Her body was limp. She hugged her backpack tightly, trying to muffle her sobs. Her mind was a mess of fear and anger. She knew if that man came back, she didn't know what would happen. Without thinking, she scrambled to her feet and ran out of the substation, disappearing into the heavy rain. Her old moped was still there, but the keys were gone. She had no choice but to leave it. Soaked to the bone, she walked the mile home through the dark streets. At their small apartment on the edge of town, her mother, Sarah, was waiting anxiously. Eliza, why are you so late? You're soaking wet. Eliza didn't answer right away. She just hugged her mother tightly and cried her heart out. It took several minutes before she could tell her story. As Sarah listened, her face turned red with rage. My God. What kind of police officer is that? No compassion at all. But behind her anger, there was fear. They knew how difficult it was to fight the authorities in a small town like theirs. One wrong move could make their lives even harder. Sarah finally took a deep breath. Okay, honey. Tomorrow, I'm going to the precinct. I'll speak to them calmly. There must be one decent cop left in this town. Eliza nodded slowly, but deep inside, the trauma was already taking root. She couldn't forget the threatening look in Sullivan's eyes. That night, the rain didn't stop. The wind blew the worn curtains in their small room. Eliza lay awake, staring at the water stains on the ceiling. She didn't know that from that night on, her life was about to change completely. That who she really was and who her family used to be would soon be revealed in the most unexpected way. Meanwhile, in a large house in Columbus, a high-ranking man in the U.S. Army opened a file on his desk. His name was Colonel James Vance. In his hand was an old photograph of a little girl with long hair. On the back of the photo, one name was written, Eliza Hayes. He stared at the photo for a long time, then spoke quietly to his aide. Find this girl. I believe she's grown up by now. And she is my granddaughter. The rain stopped just before dawn. At the quiet police substation, Officer Sullivan returned, his uniform damp. He cursed under his breath, then saw Eliza's old moped still parked there. He smiled slyly. Tomorrow morning, if that kid comes back, I'll make sure she never forgets who's in charge here, he muttered, lighting a cigarette. He had no idea that his actions that night would be the beginning of his own destruction. That morning, the sun had just risen, but the atmosphere in Eliza's apartment felt heavy. Sarah sat in the living room, her eyes swollen. Eliza prepared her school clothes with trembling hands. She didn't want to go, but her mother insisted. Don't let people like him make you afraid, Sarah said softly. We didn't do anything wrong. Eliza nodded, though her heart was still pounding. She could still feel the cop's rough hand on her wrist and the stale smell of smoke from his uniform. Every time she remembered, her heart hammered. But she knew she had to keep going. Outside, the streets were getting busy. Schoolchildren passed by, laughing cheerfully as if the world had no problems. Eliza could only watch them from afar, feeling like an outsider to their simple happiness. At the end of the street, a middle-aged man stood near a coffee shop. He wore a plain brown jacket and a baseball cap. His gaze followed Eliza's steps quietly. In his hand was a small photo, the same one Colonel Vance had held the night before. This was Sergeant First Class Davis, Vance's aide, sent to find Eliza discreetly. My God, it's really her, he murmured. He took a photo of Eliza from a distance and sent a text message. Colonel, I've found her. Conditions are modest. I will observe for now. Colonel Vance, who was at his base, received the message. His stern face slowly softened. Finally, he said softly, the granddaughter I've been searching for. Meanwhile, at the small-town police precinct, the morning seemed normal. A few officers were busy filing reports. Officer Sullivan sat relaxed at a corner desk, sipping coffee and scrolling through his phone. A text from a buddy at another precinct popped up. Hey man, be careful. Heard Internal Affairs is sniffing around the district, checking on extortion complaints. Sullivan replied with a short laugh. I'm clean. Besides, who's gonna dare open their mouth around here? He texted back, slipping the phone into his pocket. Suddenly, the precinct door opened. A woman entered with a determined face, carrying a yellow envelope. It was Sarah. Good morning, officer, she said politely. I'm here to talk about my daughter, Eliza Hayes. She said her moped was impounded by one of your officers. The room fell silent. Sullivan, in the corner, turned his head, his expression instantly changing. He looked Sarah up and down, then stood up with a cynical smile. Oh, so you're the mother of that kid from yesterday, he said. Like I told her, the scooter was impounded for expired tags and resisting an officer. My daughter did not resist, Sarah shot back. She's a good kid. Even if she was wrong, she should have been given a ticket, not intimidated like that. Sullivan's eyes narrowed. Ma'am, you better watch your mouth. This is a police station, not a flea market. If you want to protest, bring proof. Don't just make accusations. Sarah gripped her envelope tightly. I know you held her moped and demanded $200. I don't have proof, but I'm not going to be silent. The tension in the room thickened. A few younger officers looked at each other. They knew Sullivan's habits, but they were too afraid to speak. Only one, a young officer named Daniels, looked visibly uneasy. Sullivan laughed coldly. A bribe? Don't make up stories, ma'am. I'm a law enforcement officer. If you slander me, I can have you arrested. Sarah's face paled, but she stared back, unafraid. Go ahead, sir. But I will also be reporting this to the county sheriff. If there's no justice here, maybe there is somewhere else. Sullivan fought back his anger. That's enough, ma'am. Get out before I detain you for interfering with a state officer's duties. Sarah lowered her head, holding back tears, and walked out. Officer Daniels, who had been silent the whole time, watched her go with a heavy heart. He knew Sarah was telling the truth. He'd heard the rumors about Sullivan shaking down poor residents. As soon as Sarah left, Sullivan approached Daniels. You see that? That's how these poor folks are. A little trouble, they cry. A little pressure, they report you. But in the end, they always shut up if you push back hard enough. Daniels just gave a short reply, yes, sir. But in his heart, he thought something else. If this is allowed to happen, the law here will never be clean. At school, Eliza tried to calm herself. Her friends, especially Rachel, her best friend, tried to comfort her. Eliza, if that cop was really that rough, you have to tell the principal. Don't be quiet. Eliza shook her head. No, Rach. I just want this to be over. I'm afraid of making things harder for my mom. But by the afternoon, news of the incident began to circulate quietly among the students. Some had heard it from residents near the substation. Others added their own embellishments. Some even thought Eliza had been detained for stealing the moped. She kept her head down all day, ashamed and afraid. When school let out, Rachel grabbed her hand. I'll walk you home. Eliza smiled weakly. Thanks. But I want to stop by the substation first. I want to try and get the moped. If I can. Rachel looked worried. By yourself? Yeah. I just want to try to talk to him nicely. That afternoon, the sky was overcast again. At the same police substation, Sullivan was sitting, smoking, and counting some cash in a small drawer. Eliza approached slowly, carrying a small envelope with her mother's savings. Excuse me, sir, she said quietly. Sullivan turned, then grinned. Oh, you came back. So, you bring the money? Yes, sir. But it's only $150. Is that okay? I promise I'll get the rest next week. Sullivan stood up, moving closer, studying Eliza's face. You think I'm running a flea market? This isn't a negotiation. If you want your scooter back, you know how. His gaze was just like the night before. Dark and terrifying. Eliza took a step back. I brought the money, sir. Please. Don't. Sullivan laughed softly. That's small change. But you can still pay. In other ways. His hand reached out, trying to touch her chin. But suddenly, a heavy voice came from the doorway. Leave her alone, Sullivan. Sullivan froze. In the doorway stood Officer Daniels, his face firm and his smartphone in his hand, recording. I've been recording since you started talking. Every word you said is on this video. Sullivan's face went white. You're crazy, Daniels. You're dead. Daniels looked at him coldly. I'm sick of the way you treat the poor people in this town. Sullivan lunged forward, trying to grab the phone. A violent scuffle broke out. Eliza screamed for help. Outside, several residents who were passing by started to gather, hearing the commotion. Sullivan, in a panic, punched Daniels hard, knocking him down. He then grabbed the phone and smashed it on the ground. But it was too late. The citizens had crowded the entrance, several recording the scene with their own phones. Hey, why are the cops fighting? Someone yelled. Eliza ran out, covering her face, sobbing. But she hadn't gone far when she saw someone waiting for her across the street. Sergeant Davis. Eliza Hayes, the man asked gently. Don't be afraid. I'm from Columbus. I'm here on behalf of your family. Eliza was stunned. My family? Davis nodded. Your grandfather, Colonel James Vance, has been looking for you. He just found out you're his granddaughter. Eliza was frozen. The world seemed to stop for a moment. She never knew her father was the son of a high-ranking officer. But why only now? Her voice was barely a whisper. It's a long story. But the important thing is, starting right now, you are not alone. We are going to help you and your mother. That night, news of the incident at the small substation began to spread through local social media. Daniel's recording, which he had backed up, and videos from several witnesses circulated on Facebook and in text groups. The videos clearly showed how Officer Sullivan acted aggressively and tried to extort money from Eliza. Comments poured in. Finally, his behavior is exposed. That poor kid, she's still in high school. I hope she gets justice. The next day, a team from Internal Affairs came directly to the precinct. Officer Sullivan was called in for questioning. His face was tense, but he still tried to defend himself. It was just a misunderstanding, sir. The girl was provoking me. But all the evidence was too clear. Officer Daniels submitted the full, undamaged recording from his cloud backup, and several citizens also testified. In a short time, the case became a major local scandal. At her home, Eliza sat with her mother and Sergeant Davis. On the table was an official envelope with a U.S. Army letterhead, addressed from Colonel James Vance. A request for Ms. Eliza Hayes and Ms. Sarah Hayes to come to Columbus to meet the family. Sarah read the letter with tears streaming down her face. All this time, I never knew your late father was a colonel's son. He never talked about it. Davis smiled warmly. He just wanted to live a simple life, ma'am. But the colonel regrets deeply that he never found his son before he passed away. Eliza looked down, her heart a mix of emotions. She still couldn't believe that her ordinary, difficult life had suddenly intersected with one of the most powerful men in the state. But behind the shock, one thing was certain. That dark night at the police substation had changed everything. And for Mike Sullivan, the shadow of his own actions was beginning to catch up. Slowly but surely. 3 days had passed since the incident. The town of Millwood was buzzing. The video of Sullivan bullying Eliza continued to circulate. Several local news outlets even ran articles with the headline, Local officer suspended, investigated by IAD for extorting high school student. For many, it was just a day's news. But for Sullivan, it was the beginning of his life's collapse. Inside an interrogation room at the county office, Sullivan sat tensely. Across from him, an officer from Internal Affairs looked at the report with a flat expression. "Officer Mike Sullivan," the officer said slowly. "This report states that you solicited a bribe from a minor, Eliza Hayes, and even engaged in inappropriate conduct at the substation. Do you deny this?" Sullivan tried a stiff smile. "It's all a misunderstanding, sir. That kid accused me without any proof. That video is just a snippet. It doesn't show what really happened." The IAD officer put the file down, staring at him. "We have the full, unedited recording from Officer Daniels and 3 civilian witnesses. You don't need to pretend. You know the consequences." Sullivan's face turned pale. "Sir, I've been on the force for 12 years. Please, don't just throw me out like this. I have a family." "If you remembered your family, you wouldn't have disgraced this badge," the officer replied coldly. "We're sending this report to the district attorney. In the meantime, you are suspended indefinitely, pending termination." Sullivan slammed the table. "That's not fair. Everyone in this district knows roadside fines are common. Why am I the only one taking the fall?" The room went quiet. The IAD officer stared at him. "Because you got caught." Those words hit him like a hammer. Sullivan fell silent, then looked down. He realized this was no longer a small problem. His reputation was destroyed, and his career was almost certainly over. Meanwhile, at Eliza's small apartment, the atmosphere had completely changed. Sergeant Davis arrived with an official vehicle. That day, he was driving Eliza and Sarah to Columbus to meet Colonel Vance. Eliza wore a simple blue dress. Her face still looked tired, but there was a small spark of new hope in her eyes. Her mother looked at her, eyes glistening. "Your father would be so happy right now," Sarah said softly. "You're finally going to meet your grandpa." The car drove past fields and small towns. Fresh air flowed through the slightly open window. Eliza stared outside, watching the green landscape that felt like a new chapter in her life. After a tower drive, they arrived at a large, beautiful white house in a wealthy suburb of Columbus. The lawn was vast, with an American flag flying proudly on a tall pole. An older man in a nice polo shirt walked out onto the porch. Colonel James Vance. As soon as he saw Eliza get out of the car, he stopped. His eyes welled up. He walked slowly toward her. "Eliza," his voice trembled. "You look just like your father when he was young." Eliza looked down respectfully, tears falling freely. I just found out, Grandpa." Vance pulled her into a tight hug. "Forgive me, kid. I was too late to find you. But from this day on, you will never have to worry about anything again." Sarah watched, moved to tears. A warmth filled the yard. But behind the emotional reunion, the wound in Eliza's heart hadn't fully healed. The shadow of the substation and the sound of Sullivan's threats still haunted her sleep. Later that afternoon, at the military base where Vance worked as a senior advisor, a young officer brought him a report. "Sir, here's the complete data on your granddaughter's case in Millwood. It's being handled by IAD. The officer, Mike Sullivan, is being processed." Vance read it quickly, his face hardening. "A man like that doesn't deserve to wear a uniform. I want to make sure he can never oppress anyone else again." The officer nodded. "Understood, sir. We've already coordinated with the state police for additional oversight." Vance looked out the window. Justice can't just stop at a report. Make sure he faces the full consequences. That night, Sullivan sat alone in his cramped living room. The small, standard-issue apartment felt darker than usual. His wife, Maya, sat across from him, her face angry and her eyes swollen. "So, it's all true?" Maya asked quietly. "You demanded money from that high school girl? And you even. Where did you hear that?" Sullivan snapped. "Everyone in the complex knows," Maya shouted. "Your video is all over the internet. The kids at school are talking about it. The neighbors are laughing at us. Don't you realize, Mike? Our son doesn't want to go to school because he's ashamed. Sullivan looked down, silent. The sound of his son crying came from the bedroom. Maya stood up, grabbed a suitcase, and said quietly, I don't know what you've become, Mike. But I can't live with a man who hurts other people's children. She walked out, leaving Sullivan alone. Rain began to fall outside. Sullivan sat in the old chair, staring at the empty floor, then slammed the table with a trembling fist. This is all because of that kid, he whispered. That kid ruined my life. But deep in his heart, something stirred. The guilt he had suppressed for so long began to surface. He remembered Eliza's face that night, her tears, her fear. For the first time, Mike Sullivan felt disgusted with himself. A few days later, IAD officially announced that Sullivan was found guilty of gross misconduct. He was dishonorably discharged from the police force. The news was broadcast on local TV and shared again in community groups. Arrogant officer officially fired. High school victim receives special protection. The community cheered, relieved. But for Sullivan, it was the end of everything. He had to vacate his apartment. He sold his car and moved in with his brother on the outskirts of town. No one wanted to talk to him. At the store, people just whispered when he walked by. It's a shame, but he deserved it. Karma comes fast. Those words echoed in his head. One night, sitting on the porch with a bottle of water, Sullivan stared at the empty street and murmured, I used to think money could buy everything. Now I know that peace of mind costs more than anything I ever took. He took a long breath, his eyes wet. Maybe this is the punishment I deserve. On the other side, Eliza's life began to stabilize. She and her mother were now living in Colonel Vance's home in Columbus. She was accepted into a prestigious high school in the city with her grandfather's help. But even though her life was improving, Eliza remained humble. One afternoon, she was sitting on the porch, sipping tea and looking out at the yard. Colonel Vance came and sat with her. I heard from Sergeant Davis that you want to visit Millwood for a day. Are you sure you're ready? Eliza nodded. I have to, Grandpa. There's something I need to do. The next day, she and her mother drove back to their old town. The bus terminal was as busy as ever. Eliza told her mother to wait in the car. She got out and walked toward the small park nearby. Sitting on a bench, disheveled and thin, was Mike Sullivan. He was staring blankly, a cardboard sign asking for money at his feet. He didn't see her approaching. Eliza stood there for a moment, her heart heavy. The man who had terrified her was now broken. She walked to a nearby hot dog stand, bought a meal and a bottle of water, and walked back. Sir? Sullivan looked up, his eyes dull and confused. Eliza held out the food. Here. This is for your lunch. Sullivan looked at the food, then at her face. He stared, confused, and then a look of horrified recognition crossed his face. His hands began to shake. He slowly took the bag, tears suddenly streaming down his face. You're still helping me? After everything I did to you? Eliza gave a small, sad smile. I just don't want to add to my own burdens by hating you. Life has already punished you enough, sir. Sullivan stared at her, then bowed his head, sobbing uncontrollably. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you, kid. May God forgive me. Eliza looked at the sky, which was beginning to turn orange, and then walked away. Back in the car, Sarah, who had watched from the driver's seat, looked at her daughter. Are you sure you're okay, honey? Eliza smiled faintly. Yes, Mom. Because if I keep holding on to that grudge, I'll never really heal. Sarah looked at the sky, a single tear rolling down her cheek. You are an amazing young woman. The car pulled away slowly, passing the terminal that was beginning to empty. The sky turned a golden orange. And at the end of the street, the sun sank slowly, marking the end of one dark chapter in their lives, but not the end of everything. Because in Eliza's heart,